What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel. Now, welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed. What was I finna say in the opening of this video? I don't remember. Y'all's niece has me out here looking crazy with the scar, okay? I was holding her at the dog park this morning. She spots another dog that she decides she wants to fight. Chaos ensues right in my arms because, of course, I'm holding her. So, yeah. Y'all like my hair? I got tired of the wigs. Definitely got tired of the wigs. I found an amazing stylist here in Houston. I'm so happy. His name is Ryan Anderson. You can find him on Style Seat, but you better hurry up because he's definitely about to close his books. Amazing, amazing stylist. He keeps mother's hair slayed as of lately. I can wear my natural hair. It does not frizz up or anything. We did add some micro links for a little more fullness, a little bit more length. I absolutely love it here, like so much. And if you are looking for some really good quality extensions in Houston, I also link down below where I got the hair from because y'all always ask where I get my hair from, so I'll let you know where I got that from. You can find them both in the description box. Now let's get to this story because today's video is going to be a long one. I already know, y'all. I said when I film this, it's going to take me a good 3 hours. This is a long story. And I also want to address in the beginning that some of the victims will not have photos because the only photos I could find were like the crime scene photos that were very disturbing. So if I was able to find a good respectable image of them, then it'll be there. If not, then it will not. Let's get started. All right, today's video is about Mr. Randy Stephen Kraft, the scorecard killer. You may have heard of him. You may not have. But either way, that's who I am going to talk about today. Randy Stephen Kraft is born in Long Beach, California on March 19th of 1945, making him a Pisces. Barely, but he's a Pisces nonetheless, okay? He is definitely one of your people. Shout out to my girl Keelan. He's one of y'all. He is born the fourth child and only son of Opal Lee and Harold Kraft. But when Randy is about 3 years old, they relocate to Orange County. As for the family's finances, they make enough money to survive and, afford all of the things that they need. His father being a production worker and his mother Opal being a seamstress. Now see, Miss Opal was a hustler because she was not only a seamstress. She would oftentimes take on little side jobs and gigs to help supplement the family's income, especially while the husband is in between jobs or whenever work is just light for him as a production worker. Opal was down for her man and them kids, okay? She was definitely willing to go above and beyond to make sure that they had everything that they needed and that they could live comfortably. Not only does she work extra hard to make sure that they are able to provide for the children, Opal also makes it a priority to spend time with the children. Despite how busy she is at times, she is never an absent parent. She is active in their school life as well. She serves on the Parent Teachers Association and volunteers at random various school events. Opal really did what she needed to do. Shout out to Opal. Now, on the other side of the coin, Mr. Harold was not that involved parent at all. He went to work and he'd come home and indulge in the things that he liked to indulge in and rest until it was time to go back to work. And he did not make much time for the children. Instead, he decides to leave that up to Opal. He actually rarely attends any of the family functions, any of the family holiday gatherings, absolutely nothing school related, and is overall very distant with the family. The rest of the family unit is quite close and loving though, and especially with Randy, the beloved only boy. He is spoiled and loved on a lot by both his sisters and his mother. Like, they all treat him like he is their girl. And not only does Randy receive this attention at home, he receives a lot of attention at school as well because he is regarded as a very intelligent child. He is also very well behaved. He receives an invitation to attend accelerated classes in junior high. And in high school, he founded a World Affairs Club and decides that he'd like to become a U.S. Senator someday. He's a very active student. He is a Boy Scout. He is a member of the school's debate and tennis teams. And overall, he's just very well liked and regarded by all as a very pleasant and intelligent student. He always makes good grades, and towards the end of high school, he begins to delve into the dating pool and entertain the ladies. Now, people found this quite strange because a lot of the people who were close to him in high school, as well as his family members, assumed that he was into the men's. Now, he is, in fact, into the men's, but he is at this point keeping it a secret. Randy feared that he would face judgment from his friends and family if he came out as his true self. And so at this point, he is dedicated to keeping that a secret. Granted, the little closet he hiding in, girl, obviously has a glass door upon it because the girls can see inside. Nevertheless, they roll with it, okay? They just go along with it. In 1963, he graduates high school and enrolls in Claremont's Men's College. He studies economics and joins the Reserve Officer Training Corps. He also regularly attends pro-Vietnam War rallies in support of the conservative political candidates. During his final year of college, he begins working at a local gay bar as a bartender. And not only is he realizing that, being gay ain't so bad, maybe this is all right. There are other sides of him that he is exploring and learning. And in this exploration, he finds that he is also very much into bondage. Now, because he works at a nightclub and he's a bartender, it is not strange that, he comes in late at night. However, one thing that his roommate finds to be strange is that Randy begins to disappear quite often for days at a time. And then he would randomly just reemerge, and it will always be at this awkward time in the middle of the night. He'd be gone for a couple days, but he never just pop up in the middle of the day on a Tuesday. It would always be around 3 a.m. And maybe the roommate was just nosy like me, honey, because he always wondered what Randy was up to when he would disappear. He never talked about it. He never said, hey, I'm going here for a couple of days. Granted, maybe it's not the roommate's business, but he found it to be a bit strange. Now, one of the things that Randy is up to during these disappearing acts comes to light in 1966 when he is arrested for lewd behavior while trying to solicit an undercover officer. But because it is his first offense, he is let off with just a warning. His exploration of his sexuality and just enjoying life, being young, partying, experimenting with drugs and alcohol, and regularly attending nightclubs and staying out late gambling. This all begins to negatively impact his studies. He falls behind and his grades suffer so much that he is actually forced to repeat a course in order to graduate, which came as a surprise to most that knew Randy because his schooling and his grades had always been very important to him. But y'all, he got out there and started having fun and living life, and they took a back seat. Around this time, his political views also began to shift, and he leans more toward the Democratic side. Robert F. Kennedy is the president during this time, and Randy is devastated when he is assassinated. After college, he joins the U.S. Air Force, where he excels. He quickly rises in ranks to Airman First Class, and later that year, he decides that, it's time that I stop living in the shadows and come out and live in my truth. He tells his parents that he is homosexual and that is just what it is. Take him or leave him. Now, Opal, of course, had a little inkling that her son was into the men's, right? But I guess she was holding out hope that she was wrong because he was dating women and pretending not to be. She makes it known that she is disapproving of this lifestyle, but she also tells him that she loves him and that she'll support him regardless. He unfortunately does not receive that same level of support from his father, who, upon hearing the news, flies into a whole rage. Eventually, he somewhat comes around to supporting Randy, but things are not quite the way that they were before. I mean, he wasn't that involved in the beginning, but he is even more distant going forward. And although his sisters and his mother are all more supportive than his father, things don't ever completely return to the way that they were beforehand. None of his relationships feel quite the same as they did before he disclosed his sexuality. Because of this, he begins to distance himself from each of them. He resented the fact that they obviously felt away and were treating him differently. In addition to coming out to his family, he goes on to come out to his superiors in the Air Force because at this point, he just wants to live out and free in the open. He is very much tired of pretending, okay? However, not long after coming out to his colleagues and superiors in the Air Force, he is discharged for medical reasons. Now, it is reported that he sought legal counsel after this and tried to, I guess, sue for them deciding to discharge him. But even when he threatened them with a lawsuit, nothing changed. They refused to reverse the decision and pretty much sent him home. He goes back home and returns to bartending at local gay nightclubs. In March of the following year, Randy encounters 13-year-old Joseph Rancher at Huntington Beach. Now, Joseph had actually caught himself running away from home that day. He is at Huntington Beach. He is not quite sure where he wants to go, where he plans to go. He just knows that he does not want to return to where he had come from. Randy learns all of this during a conversation with the young boy and invites the child to his home for shelter. He also tells the young boy that in addition to having a place to stay, he has a woman there who would have sex with him. Now, Joseph's little hormone having eyes light up at the thought. Free shelter, and there's a woman who is going to child. He doesn't hesitate to accept this proposal. This sounds like a good time to him. They head back to Randy's apartment, and the young boy is instead drugged, beaten, and assaulted repeatedly. After having been there for hours, young Joseph manages to finally escape once Randy leaves for work and leaves him there unattended. He was, of course, passed out when Randy had left him there, and Randy believed that he would remain that way, at least until, it was time for him to come home. But luckily, he does not. He leaves the home and begins walking down the street, and a random person that he was passing on the sidewalk there noticed how disheveled and beaten up, roughed up he looked, and then offers to help him by calling the police. He receives medical care. His stomach is pumped, which ultimately saves his life. He is able to give police a physical description of Randy, as well as a detailed account of all of the things that had transpired except the assault. And you know what kind of assault I'm talking about. Y'all know YouTube is real sensitive. The young boy is too ashamed to admit to his parents, who of course had been called by this point. And he was also ashamed to admit to the male officers that he had been violated in that way. The police then go to Randy's apartment to speak with him, but he is not there. It is just his roommate, who allows them to come in and gives them permission to look around. They conduct a brief search of Randy's room, but because the young boy had admitted to willingly taking the drugs, had omitted the sexual assault, and because they had searched Randy's room without a warrant, no charges are able to be filed against him. This is enough to shake Randy up a little bit, but not for long. The following year, on October 5th, 1971, 30-year-old Wayne Duquette, who is also a bartender, is found deceased and discarded alongside the Ortega Highway in California. By the time he is discovered, he had been there so long that they were unable to recognize any signs of foul play, and they're also unable to determine a definitive COD. They are, however, able to determine that there are large amounts of alcohol in his system, or were at the time of his death, and they list it as alcohol poisoning because they really don't have much else to go off of, which is unfortunate because there was definitely foul play involved. He had been lured back to Randy's apartment under the guise of alcohol and a good time, and instead is killed and pushed out of a moving vehicle. Now, this is Randy's first victim, and because he has plans for it to be the first of many, he starts a list, and on it he lists his first victim as Stable, which was the name of the nightclub that he bartended at. He allows for a waiting period to see if he was really in fact going to get away with it, and when he does, he decides to move forward with victim number 2. 15 months after that, Randy runs across a 20-year-old Marine by the name of Edward. Now, Edward Moore was last seen leaving the barracks on Christmas Eve, and unfortunately his body is found alongside the 405 freeway in Seal Beach, California just 2 days later. He has so many scrapes and abrasions like all over his body that investigators believe that he had to have been pushed from a moving vehicle. His autopsy reveals that he had also been bound at the wrists and ankles, beaten with a blunt instrument over the face, and then strangled. As if that is not bad enough, he is covered in human bite marks and has a sock shoved into his rectum. 6 weeks later, on February 6th of 1973, an unidentifiable man between the ages of 17 and 25, is discovered near Terminal Island Freeway in Wilmington. He too had been strangled and also has a sock in his rectum. And merely 2 months after that, 17-year-old Kevin Bailey is found alongside a road in Huntington Beach. In addition to suffering the same type of fate as the victims before, he had been completely castrated and sodomized before his death. Between April and July of that year, 2 additional victims are found. One being an unidentified youth who is also emasculated and discarded in Wilmington, and the other being 20-year-old Ronnie, who is discarded in a similar fashion. Now, Ronnie had last been seen on July 28th, and he is found just 2 days later. And the markings on his wrists and ankles suggest that he had been bound and suspended from some sort of device for quite some time before he had been discarded there. Meanwhile, Randy is still serving up drinks to the girls down at the bar, doing body shots after actually dumping bodies. And literally no one has a clue that he is capable of any of this. He is still very much that same charming, charismatic, intelligent individual that people had perceived him to be, back in high school and his college days. On December 29th of 1973, just a couple of months after Ronnie, 23-year-old art student Vincent is discovered in the San Bernardino Mountains. He'd had a sock forced into his rectum. His hands had been severed. They are never found. And investigators can tell from his wrist as well that he had been bound for quite some time before he had been dumped there. Between December 29th of 1973 and November of 1974, 5 additional victims are discovered, all treated within the same manner. And at this point, the FBI becomes involved because the local authorities are not able to get a handle on things. Like, they have no idea who the person is that could be responsible for all of this. And because all of the crimes are so similar, they know that, of course, this is done by the same person. 14 total victims and 0 suspects is not looking good for them. The FBI puts together a profile of the assailant, assuming him to be someone with above average intelligence, someone who is very meticulous and organized, and who very likely had some sort of military training. Now, this they believe because 2 of the victims have been found with tissue stuffed into their nostrils, which is a technique known to be used in the military, at least at this time, to prevent bodies from purging after death. And they also assume that this is the purpose of the sock being in the rectum, to also avoid a mess being made after the fact while being transported to their disposal sites. But even with this profile of their assailant, they still, of course, have no idea who this person could be, because, child, they can be anybody's uncle, okay? They are not really any closer to identifying their assailant. Meanwhile, Randy is still out there running amok. On January 3rd of 1975, Randy picks up a 17-year-old high school student by the name of John, who was last seen boarding a bus in Long Beach, and the day afterward is found discarded at Sunset Beach with a wooden surveyor's stake shoved into his backside. Now, before this, they had not suspected that they were dealing with more than one assailant, but the drag marks in the sand near where he was discovered suggests to investigators that he had been carried by 2 people instead of 1. And just 2 weeks later, the body of 21-year-old Craig is discovered in a parking lot of a hotel near the Pacific Coast Highway. And at this point, Randy is really feeling himself. Like, he's really getting into his groove and feeling like they're not gonna catch me. So why wait? He then goes out and he spots 2 teens, Heath Crowell and Kent May, who he speaks with for a brief moment. They have a nice conversation, which takes place in a Long Beach parking lot where they, of course, meet. And Randy is able to convince them to get inside of his car. For hours, the 3 of them ride around in his Mustang aimlessly. The 2 teens are being given beer and Valium, and eventually Keith passes out. Now, Kent sees Keith pass out, and he then feels himself like getting a little woozy, fading in and out of consciousness, and he fights to remain conscious, but ultimately loses the battle and passes out himself. Randy pulls into the parking lot where he had initially met the 2 of them. He opens up the car door, pushes Kent out of the car onto the parking lot, and speeds off. Now, this is all witnessed by two individuals who were present in the parking lot that night, being nosy like I would have been. And they also see another individual inside of the car, which happens to be Keith, of course, who is passed out, slumped over, leaning over into the driver's seat, obviously unconscious. About 5 weeks after this night, Keith's skull is found near the Long Beach Marina, and the remainder of him is found 6 months later. Now, when news spreads of this discovery and Keith's identity is plastered all over the news, the two individuals who were there that night in the parking lot, they recognized him as the guy that they had saw slumped over inside of that Mustang. They called police with the license plate number, and of course the vehicle is registered to none other than Mr. Kraft. You would think this would be a major break in the case, and this is the point where things begin to unravel for Randy, but child, obviously that's not the case. Look at the timestamp. It does not. Police do locate Randy Kraft and they bring him in for questioning. He initially denies having ever met Keith or Kent, but later finally admits that he had met the two of them a couple of months prior. He also admits to persuading them to drink and take drugs as he drives around the city for a bit before returning Kent to the parking lot per his request. But he claims that Keith was not quite ready to end the night, and the two of them do a bit more driving before he encounters some car troubles. Now, according to him, he had decided to walk to the nearest gas station, and Keith had decided to stay back with the car. But Randy claims that when he returns to the car to wait for a tow truck, Keith is nowhere to be found. Now, police speak with Randy's roommate yet again to see if he has any information that could enlighten things for him. And he claims that Randy had called him that night and told him about the car trouble he was experiencing. But police are still not convinced that Randy is telling the truth. They decide to move forward with charges against Randy, but the DA's office declines their request when the report from the coroner comes back. Keith's COD has been listed as an accidental drowning. And if there is no foul play determined to have taken place, then there is no cause for anyone to be charged. At this time, Randy decides to take a short break, which lasts from the summer of 1975 till December 31st of 1975. So it don't last long, but it lasts a couple of months. And on this day, he abducts 22-year-old Mark Hall. Now, what happens to Mark Hall is considered to be the most horrific of all of Randy's crimes, and it is quite gruesome. He takes Mark to a remote canyon where he is then tied to a tree. He takes the cigarette lighter from his car and burns him on his chest, his scrotum, his nose, and his cheeks. He, of course, assaults the man, emasculates him, and takes the man's private parts after he removes them and shoves them up his back end. Mark suffered many lacerations all over his body from what looked to be broken glass. Then Randy shoves leaves and dirt down his throat until he eventually dies due to asphyxiation from all of the dirt and leaves that have been lodged into his trachea and throat. He then, of course, leaves him there tied to the tree. Now, forensic experts, they are able to determine definitively that Mark had been alive for most of this. Months later, 30-year-old Randy enters into a relationship with 19-year-old Jeff Seelig, and the couple moved to Laguna Hills together. Now, they're in a pretty serious relationship. They consider themselves monogamous, but they like to have fun with a third party from time to time. Their preference is to pick up hitchhikers and proposition them a ride to wherever they're trying to get to in exchange for a little three-way rendezvous. Now, during this relationship, Randy is a pretty good partner. He's very loving to Jeff. Jeff never experiences any acts of violence or rage or anger. He never even catches a glimpse of who and what Randy truly is and the horrible acts he likes to commit in his spare time. And Jeff proves to be a pretty positive distraction for Randy because he goes all year without claiming another victim. But December 10th of 1976 rolls around and well, Randy decides that it's time. A 19-year-old by the name of Paul goes missing, and even with valiant search efforts, they are unable to determine what happened to him. It is as if he has simply vanished from the face of the earth. After this, another 16 months go by without incident until April 16th of 1978 when Randy abducts 18-year-old Scott Hughes, forces him to take large amounts of Valium, slices open his scrotum to remove one of his testicles, and then chokes him with his very own shoelace. He then discards this young man alongside a freeway ramp, and then Randy adds him to his growing list of victims as Maureen Carson. Just 2 months later, 23-year-old Roland Young is found near a San Diego freeway. Roland had had his privates removed and he had then been stabbed. 8 days after that, 20-year-old Richard Keith is found discarded alongside a road. It is obvious by his wrist that he had been bound tightly for quite some time before being dumped there. The more of these crimes that Randy is committing and seemingly getting away with, the more comfortable he becomes with his actions. And the more comfortable and confident he becomes, the more frequent these ordeals occur. 3 weeks after the discovery of Richard, Randy claims yet another victim, 23-year-old hitchhiker Keith Klingbeil. Large amounts of alcohol and Tylenol are found in Keith's system. He had been strangled with his own shoelaces and then tossed out alongside the I-5 freeway. Now, at the time of his discovery, Keith is still alive, but unfortunately, he passes away shortly after arriving to the hospital. 2 months later, 20-year-old Richard Crosby is found in San Bernardino. Now, he had gone missing the day before he was discovered. As he is hitchhiking home from a theater, he had been suffocated and had his left nipple seared by a car's cigarette lighter. And then a 21-year-old Long Beach truck driver, Michael Joseph, is found with his private parts removed, and he had been dumped onto the ramp of the I-605 freeway. Michael had suffered a lot of burns as well all over his body and had very obviously been sodomized with a foreign object. 7 months go by without Randy committing any more of these heinous crimes. But of course, it is not long before he returns back to the streets, raining horror. In the summer of 1979, he abducts a 20-year-old Marine by the name of Donnie. Now, the condition in which he is found suggests that he absolutely was thrown from a vehicle at a very high speed. He suffered alcohol poisoning. He had rope burns, showing that he had been bound and tortured much like the victims before him. And 2 months later, the chopped remains of 21-year-old Keith Johnson are found inside trash bags that were placed inside of a cardboard box and left behind a Union 76 gas station in Long Beach. A sock had been inserted into his rectum. He is missing his right leg and both arms, which are never located. And it is quite obvious that he had been there for several days. He is entered onto Randy's scorecard and listed as England. And the reason for this is because he was, in fact, an English man. 2 weeks later, 19-year-old Gregory is found in Lake Arrowhead. His head, his private parts, and his legs have all been removed. And right after this, another 2 victims surfaced, one of which being 19-year-old Mark Marsh, whose hands had also been removed post-mortem. Randy was a busy, terribly nasty boy. He was a little funny looking too, honestly. In the summer of 1980, Randy takes a business trip to Oregon that requires him to be there until August. And during this time, he claims the lives of 2 additional victims. The first victim is 17-year-old Michael O'Fallon, who had gone missing on July 17th while hitchhiking solo across the U.S. and Canada. Now, this had been a dream of his to complete before going off to college, to travel across the US and Canada taking pictures and just seeing the country in all of its beautiful glory. But unfortunately, during his process, he encounters Randy, who leaves his nude body alongside a road hogtied. His camera is later discovered amongst Randy's possessions and, of course, returned to his family, which is very sad. Randy adds him to the list as Portland, Denver. The very next day, he had claimed his second victim, whom he attacks and discards in a similar manner, and adds to his scorecard as Portland Elk. 1 month after Randy returns to California from his business trip, 19-year-old Robert Loggins is found inside of a trash bag close to the El Toro Marine Air Base. And he, of course, was a Marine himself. Photographs of him, as well as the negatives, are later found in Randy's home. And in the photos, he is seen slumped over the couch, fully clothed, but very obviously intoxicated. And then there are additional photos of him unclothed in very explicit position. In every one of the photos, whether he is clothed or unclothed, his eyes are closed. And it is unclear whether or not he is just unconscious or if he was actually deceased at the time that these pictures were taken. After this, Randy lays low for 7 months until he picks up 17-year-old Michael Cluck. This young man was also hitchhiking when he runs into Randy, and Randy is particularly violent during this ordeal. This young man suffered 31 blunt force blows to the back of his head. He is then added to the scorecard as Portland Blood, which is assumed to reference the amount of blood lost during the brutal attack. And at this time, Randy is of course back in Portland, Oregon on business yet again. I was supposed to film this video yesterday. I didn't hear not a piece of the construction crew all day. Now they all out here in the background. Hopefully it's not too much on your ears. Now, during all of this time, Randy is still in his relationship with young Jeff, but their relationship is filled with turmoil and toxicity by this point. During his spree, there were moments where the two of them had broken up, but only briefly, and despite how toxic and taxing things get between the two of them, they both remain completely committed to making their relationship work. The two of them actually begin weekly counseling sessions, all while Randy is taking out his frustrations on unsuspecting strangers. Bodies continue to pop up all over the city. There is a 17-year-old sex worker. There's a 14-year-old boy listed on the scorecard under dog because he had been at the park looking for his dog when Randy had run into him. Within the following 14 months, he claims an additional 4 victims, one of whom's military jacket he keeps as a little keepsake and wears to an outing with some friends. Now, this strikes the friends as odd, not because they recognize the jacket or anything like that. They just know that, baby, where you get this military jacket from, girl? And it does not have your name on it. At the time, the victim had not been found, so the name wasn't known to be, related to someone who had been missing or had been found deceased or anything like that. It's just, girl, whose name is this? Whose jacket is this? He then travels to Grand Rapids, Michigan on business, and 2 days into his stay, he meets 2 cousins, Dennis and Christopher. The 3 of them chat for a while in the hotel's reception area up until about right around midnight, and 2 days later on December 9th, the 2 of them are found in an open field near the hotel. Both had consumed large amounts of alcohol and Valium. They had each been assaulted, and they had been arranged in a sexual position. Granted, they're cousins. However, that is not the weirdest of what's going on here. An actual ballpoint pen had been shoved into Christopher's urethra while he was definitely still conscious. These 2 are added to his scorecard as a single entry, GR2, which stands for, of course, Grand Rapids 2. Now, Randy had taken Christopher's keys, which he had accidentally left behind in the hotel room that he was staying in, and he had also left that military jacket behind. This thing is getting real sloppy. On December 8th, he travels back to Portland again on business, and within 24 hours picks up 19-year-old hitchhiker Lance Tags. The following day, Lance is found discarded alongside a road with a sock shoved all the way down into his trachea. Now, by this time, the Oregon authorities had begun to suspect that these crimes are being committed by someone who lives out of state and just pops in from time to time. Now, I don't know how they come up with that, but that's the idea that they had. And somehow they have the right idea because we know Miss Thing lives in California. Oregon authorities, they began reaching out to neighboring states to see if anybody had any crimes happening that mirrored theirs. And authorities in Southern California, they respond very quickly because, of course, this is his main playing field. They have a whole pattern of unsolved crimes that mirror the ones happening in Oregon. Now, they don't have an idea who this person could be, but at least they know that they're looking for the same person, and it's very obvious that the same person is committing these crimes. Several weeks go by and both states are on high alert. Randy lays low as if he has a feeling or some kind of inkling that the streets are just hot right now, like that something is up. Regardless of what his reasons are for not committing any crimes during this time, his urge to commit the crimes ultimately takes over, and he strikes again on January 27th of 1983 when he abducts 21-year-old hitchhiker Eric Church and discards him alongside Interstate 605. And just 2 weeks later, on February 12th, he strikes again, killing and mutilating 2 friends. Randy would take these like hiatuses, but when he got back into action, he wasted no time. On May 14th, roughly 3 months later, at around 1:10 a.m., 2 California Highway Patrol officers take notice of a little Toyota driving very recklessly on the interstate. Okay, little Toyota's just swerving back and forth lane to lane. Once this little car makes an illegal lane change, the officers decide to slide and see what's going on because obviously whoever behind the wheel is under the influence of something. They pull over the car. The driver gets out of the car. He is very, very tipsy. He has a beer in his hand. He pours it out on the pavement right there in front of the police officers. And as the officers approach him, he identifies himself as Randy Kraft. His pants are unbuttoned. He is looking the fool. And they proceed with the sobriety test, which he obviously fails. He is then placed under arrest for driving under the influence. And all the while, these officers are completely oblivious to the fact that they have just arrested a whole serial killer. Once they get him into the backseat of the squad car, the patrol car, they go to take another look at his vehicle, and that is where they notice that it is the second person in this car. There's a man slumped over in the passenger seat, eyes closed. There are empty pill bottles and beer cans at his feet, and he is lightly covered with a jacket. They attempt to wake him up, but he is unresponsive. Now, at this point, they decide to, do a little touch and shake. But once the officer touches him, he immediately notices that the guy is cold to the touch. He checks for a pulse, and there isn't one. But what is there is ligature marks around the guy's neck. When they remove the jacket from over him, they see that his jeans are open, his private area is completely exposed, and his hands are bound, or his wrists are bound with a shoelace. He is later identified as 25-year-old Terry Gambrell, a Marine stationed at El Toro Air Base. Now, Randy is initially still only charged with the DUI while they conduct the search, just to, make sure they add everything up right and get the charges correct. They find inside of the car a belt that matches the width of like the mark around Terry's neck. They find tranquilizers. Most notably, the passenger side seat and floor of the car is heavily bloodstained, though neither Terry nor Randy have any open wounds or lacerations. They, of course, test the blood to find out whether or not it is human. It is. And when they pull up the carpet to get some of the carpet for testing, they find an envelope of over 50 photos of various young men in very disturbing poses. In every picture, the man appears to be unconscious. Inside of the trunk, they find a handwritten list of over 61 entries, which turn out to be his infamous scorecard, where he kept track of all of his victims. And the 61 sounds a lot, but several of them are double entries, bringing his victim count to about 67, if we are to assume that literally every last one was entered, right? Now, the search then expands to his home, where they find a plethora of personal belongings belonging to various men who had either been found, deceased or who are still missing. They also find even more photos like the ones found inside of his car. His trial begins on September 26th of 1988 and is the most expensive trial in Orange County at the time and lasts over 13 months. Try to look at him. He just looks so sassy. The jury deliberates for 3 whole days before finding him guilty. He is subsequently given the death penalty. Child, and they still ain't took him out. They still ain't nuked the man, okay? He is still very much sitting on death row. He has managed to evade being torched, okay? He is currently 77 years old and sitting on Death Row Avenue right now in California at the San Quentin State Prison, okay? Sis maintains his innocence till this day, and he claims, get this, the man claims that this scorecard, this list of victims, was not a victim list at all. It was, in fact, a party list of invited guests, a surprise party that he planned on throwing for Jeff, his little boyfriend. Baby, it was a surprise, to Jeff. Or was it? Do you think Jeff had anything to do with anything? Because, I don't know. They did suspect at one point that Miss Thing was working with someone else. But they did not find any evidence supporting the fact that Jeff was in on any of the things, girl, so we're not going to give him that. I'm not going to put that little jacket on his back that he's a murderer. I'm just saying I don't know. I'm not convinced either way. Girl, why am I trying to implicate Jeff? Like, why am I doing that? I have no reason. Look at me. Anyway, that concludes today's case and this look. I hope you like the look. Before you leave, do not forget to hit the thumbs up video. It does help the channel a lot. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if y'all think Jeff was into any of the things, or am I just tripping? Like, why do I want to put Jeff in the mess? I hope y'all have not heard Blue snoring the whole time, because he is in fact been snoring right behind me on the couch the entire video. I'm starving. I have to wrap, baby. Big mama gotta eat. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. Today's video, oh no, I have my AirPods in, I forgot. Chill, take 2. Today's video is about Randy. Not me forgetting his name, child. I knew his last name. Just couldn't remember the middle. I low-key look cute like this. Please let me just get through this video without being chaotic myself. Take this bill of spirit up off of me, please. I got this candle right here. Yeah. It's called Brandied Pear, and the notes are cinnamon, clove, and pear. It smells so good. I could burn it for like a couple of hours in the morning and smell it like all day until the next day. Sometimes I just pick it up and sniff it, girl, because I'm just weird like that. But it comes from Candles by Coco. I'll list that below too if y'all interested. Check them out, girl. It smells amazing. I feel like my head looks like it's like is it sideways? Is it on straight or no? Because it's like it's not on straight. Like this looks straight, but it feels uncomfortable. Girl, my head is on sideways a little bit. It's crazy. It's on diagonally. I'm so strange. I've been filming for 10 minutes. I ain't talked about a damn thing worth keeping. Wow, wow. Randy Stephen Kraft was born on February. Girl, no, he wasn't. He wasn't born on February nothing. He was not born on February anything. Oh, not today. But when Randy is about 3 years old, the following year on October 5th of okay, I'm losing my voice, forces him to take largest what? 23-year-old hitchhiker Cleet, what? Girl, what was that? Of various young men in disturbing postings? What? Poses. His trial, what? Anyway, that completes, I wanted to say concludes. Let me run that back. I want to pose for a thumbnail, but I want to also test the theory that videos perform better when you don't insert yourself in the thumbnail for some of us. So let's see.